Hi, I'm Tolga.
And I'm Taylor.
Taylor, let's talk about innovation in the oil and gas industry. What do you think oil and gas is doing in the cloud today?
Yeah, I mean, oil and gas is a really interesting story because we have this vast array of technology challenges across all the various components that the big oil and gas companies are in. So we've got a lot of use cases where data and big data and even data analytics and ML are relevant. We've got a huge IoT story, and then we've got a lot of the more traditional stories around data center consolidation, serverless technology, and all the other sort of traditional benefits that the cloud offers.
So let's talk about the data part of this. You mentioned data as a major consideration. To me, it seems like the volume of data when you're exploring the whole earth for places to find oil would be enormous. What are we seeing in this space?
Yeah, the exploration side of oil and gas is a huge place where we see data solutions emerging as an area these companies use the cloud. For example, we're analyzing seismic and geodata across the entire globe, and so companies need the huge capacity to store that data, provide analytics on it, and even apply artificial intelligence and machine learning against those models. They need to do that at a huge scale across the entire planet, but they also need to do it in a very secure way. This data is some of the most important assets these companies have, so being able to do that, get that scale capacity where they need it, when they need it, on a platform they can rely on and ensure the data is not going to be stolen or leaked out is a really important part of solving that particular problem for an oil and gas company.
Interesting problem with more data is it takes more compute to do anything useful with your data as your data set grows. So it's not just a storage problem, but a compute problem. What's unique about the cloud in the ability to process large amounts of data?
Yeah, I mean, this is where both the vast array of compute solutions that the cloud offers provides a great benefit. So, on steady state workloads, we've got a really flexible sort of VM level component. We can analyze that data that's in constant. And then with serverless technologies and auto scaling, we can also look at those data sets that either grow and shrink over time, or perhaps we only need to analyze them for a particular part of time. So these companies can convert these, massive data center monolithic systems that had to run at full capacity. They can now run that in the cloud and really only pay for that capacity they need to. So they can store all the data all the time, and they can only pay for that high throughput compute when they actually need it, which may not be, all the time.
So how they store data is also changing, right? We used to think about data warehouses as the primary way this type of data was organized, but now we think about data lakes. Can we talk about maybe how this industry benefits from a data lake approach?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the types of data that come in from these, like I said, we're talking about like seismic and satellite data around the Earth. We're also talking around, logistics data from manufacturing systems. It's a wide array. And yeah, so storing that in more traditional relational systems or large-scale data warehouses, that's a major compute hurdle. And we do see this data lake approach is really solving it because we can throw all of that somewhat disorganized, unstructured, or at least unrelated data into a single place and then apply the right technology to it at the right time to get the analytics we need to. We also don't force that data to sort of change into the mold of whatever the analytics system is. So we can store the data as we get it and not worry about dropping off things we don't need just to fit the system we need to get the analytics out of it.
Let's pivot to IoT for a second. We've got customers that are looking to IoT for predictive maintenance of oil fields, or for predictive maintenance of refinery components, or for predictive maintenance even at gas stations, right? And across the whole ecosystem. But beyond the obvious predictive maintenance, we're also seeing IoT use cases in flying drones over sites to check for safety violations, to check for asset controls. Anything else in the IoT space?
No, I mean, I think you've kind of nailed it. I mean, we're seeing some really interesting use cases for IoT. I mean, you just think about the problem. I mean, we've got, an oil field stretches hundreds of thousands of miles with wellheads, a couple feet apart, a couple miles apart. So it's really interesting. You need to gain a lot of data around those systems, like you mentioned, either for just understanding what's going on at the equipment, understanding, what you need to fix and what you need to modify. So you're not sending a technician out to check every single wellhead and every single well field, throughout time. So IoT is a great way to solve that. We're seeing some really interesting stories around IoT and communications and using devices that need to live for years without a battery change and communicating that data. And then the drone stories. I mean, we're seeing companies flying drones just to look and do visual inspections of equipment. We've had customers use them to make sure people aren't jumping the fence and messing with the equipment or stealing equipment from the site, et cetera. Right. Oil and gas is just a really great use case where IoT makes a lot of sense because you're dealing with massive scale problems, but it's a quantity issue. You've got a lot of places where you need a lot of small sensors. They need to be reliable, but they also need to be cost effective and efficient to replace and upgrade. And that's where IoT's, we've seen a lot of innovation in the oil and gas especially on the production and oilfield maintenance coming from the oil and gas industry.
And in IoT solutions, the cloud is particularly interesting because IoT means lots of data, it means rapid ingestion, it means storage, it means all these problems we talked about. So without the cloud, you end up building a lot of infrastructure to support an IoT app. And with the cloud, it just kind of scales as you go.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of similar to the data problem. Like you're applying storage or computer analytics when you need it. You're focused on taking all that data in as it comes in, which might be bursty, it might not, based on what you need. These devices may all wake up and phone home and go off. So you're able to solve for that, but then also you can run the analytics in real time for a system that's like, managing, safety conditions or monitoring. A maintenance system, maybe you only need to know that data every week or every month, and so you can just wake up and look at that data. You don't have to analyze every data as it comes in, and that's where the cloud gives you this flexibility. You're only really paying or using the resources you need when you need it, while also not reducing that time to visualization. You're still getting the analytics you need when you need them, you're just not paying for the capacity to have them when you're not looking at them.
Then you mentioned sort of IT consolidation or IT data center consolidation, something all large enterprises are looking at, and how does that work in this industry?
Yeah, oil and gas, just through its size, also benefits from a lot of the what I'll call sort of traditional use cases for the cloud. These are massive corporations, usually global, tons of facilities across corporate facilities, maintenance facilities, refineries, oil fields, exploration sites out in the ocean. So when you just look at the cloud driving companies to focus on what they need to focus on, even for a company of this size, focusing on the data center presence, like it's not a data center company, right? So the cloud gives you that ability, and we tell that story quite often to a lot of customers, like focus on what you're not. If you're not a data center company, don't build your own data centers. And I think that applies really well at massive scale of an oil and gas corporation. So we're seeing a lot of customers, move all their systems, all their data centers into the cloud, so they're getting that global presence. Companies that had massive data centers, maybe just in the US, that were servicing their oil fields across the world, now they can just have that presence where they need it in the world. They're paying less because they're not building their data centers, they're not maintaining their own leases, and they're just benefiting from that same consolidation approach. We also see, some of the enterprise solutions through the corporate use, even some of the downstream scenarios or energy marketing, where something as simple as AWS workspaces can be great in these scenarios where we had whole data centers just to support remote sites doing a specific job. We can sort of solve those back office tasks with some of the sort of technologies that the cloud offers to enterprise applications.
Awesome. So scaling your data, scaling your compute, building IoT applications, and then consolidating data centers and getting out of the business of operating data centers. Sort of 4 or 5 ways that oil and gas benefits from the cloud.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Taylor.
Yeah, thanks.